Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. November 11th, 2013. A regular fall morning in rural Pennsylvania. The ground was damp and a shallow roadside trench cut through the landscape near scattered private homes. It was quiet until two locals spotted something unusual on the side of the road. A silhouette. A person lying face down, completely still. Not a single movement. The man was gone. His clothes were soaked with blood. Scattered around him were personal belongings, and one item stood out, a smartphone. It was still on, the screen dimming slowly, as if someone had used it just moments earlier. Authorities arrived quickly. The first thing that stood out were the signs of a violent struggle. The body showed multiple wounds. The pattern and placement made it clear. The attacker had acted with intense aggression. This wasn't a random act. It was deliberate, calculated, and carried out far from prying eyes. No vehicle was found nearby. No obvious tire tracks on the roadside. Just footprints leading to the road and one faint tire mark, partly washed away by the rain. The area was remote, quiet. No chance witnesses. The weather was gray and damp, the air heavy with silence. Investigators started by examining the phone. It was still functional and hadn't been locked with a passcode. The call log revealed 2 incoming calls and 1 outgoing, all from the night before. The final call was made to an unknown number, not saved in the contact list. At that point, the team didn't even know who the man was, nor who he might have planned to meet. It took about an hour to identify him, but his name wasn't released to the public yet. The investigation had only just begun, and one thing was clear. This wasn't impulsive. No one could have guessed what was behind it. But the evidence pointed to a chilling truth. This act had been planned, and the victim was chosen on purpose. Far north in Alaska sits a town called North Pole, a place better known for its name than its reality. Founded in the 1940s as part of a holiday-themed marketing concept, the town plays up its festive image. Bright wooden houses, streetlights shaped like candy canes, and an atmosphere straight out of a storybook. But beneath the cheery surface lies something very different. The winters here are brutal. Temperatures often plunge well below -50 degrees Fahrenheit, and frost grips the town for months on end. Fewer than 2,000 people live in North Pole. For all its charm, it's a place of deep isolation, relentless cold, and a sense of being cut off from the rest of the world. This is where Miranda Barber was born in 1994. Her parents were no longer together. Her mother, Elizabeth, was raising her and her older sister Ashley on her own. Their father had little involvement in their lives. At an early age, Miranda was diagnosed with a congenital hip condition. It meant that one of her joints hadn't formed properly, causing pain and limited mobility. Walking, playing, and keeping up with others her age was difficult. For 2 years, she wore a special corrective brace. After her treatment, the family moved to another area, closer to relatives. Elizabeth's sister lived there with her husband, Richard. Their home quickly became a regular after-school stop for Miranda and Ashley, who were about 5 or 6 at the time. No one had any reason to suspect that something terrifying was about to unfold behind those closed doors. Richard appeared calm and polite around adults, but when left alone with the girls, he became someone else entirely. Over the course of several years, he repeatedly engaged in deeply disturbing behavior toward them. He used fear, threats, and manipulation to ensure their silence, keeping them from saying anything, even to their own mother. The silence lasted until Ashley finally found the courage to speak up. When Elizabeth learned the truth, she immediately took her daughters to the authorities. A formal report was filed, and Richard was taken into custody. During the search of his home, investigators found a notebook where he had documented his actions. The entries weren't just records. They looked like instructions, as if they were meant for someone else to follow. Richard was found guilty in court and sentenced to 19 years in prison. He was later released early, but within a few years violated the law again, and was sent back to serve a new sentence. At the time of the events being described, he was incarcerated once more. Even after his first arrest, the damage had been done. The trauma lingered. Miranda became withdrawn, anxious, emotionally fragile. Elizabeth struggled as well. She began experiencing breakdowns, and her reliance on alcohol and banned substances escalated. Her demeanor often showed signs of emotional detachment, irritability, and internal instability. She still made efforts to care for her daughters, but those efforts became less frequent and increasingly ineffective. The family's emotional foundation had crumbled. On top of that, their financial situation was deteriorating. There was no help coming from the outside. All three were caught in a slow decline. When Miranda turned 9, Elizabeth made a decision. She packed up and left. The family moved away from the North Pole. It was a chance to start fresh. But changing their address turned out to be much easier than escaping their past. Ashley, the older daughter, pulled away. She kept her distance and looked for outside sources of support: school, part-time jobs, friends, anything to keep her out of the house. Miranda, on the other hand, didn't try to escape. She retreated further inward, often isolating herself. She became easily agitated, lashing out. Her behavior was becoming more unpredictable. At age 12, Miranda entered a new phase of her life. She started spending time with an older group of teenagers, individuals who were already experimenting with heavy substances, drinking regularly, and living on the edge. Despite her young age, Miranda quickly became part of their world. At first, she was just observing, but it didn't take long before she began participating. Smoking, alcohol, and pills became her new normal. She often disappeared from home for long stretches. Her mother didn't always notice, and when she did, she rarely responded. Miranda would return suddenly and without explanation. Meanwhile, her behavior at school was spiraling. She became aggressive, instigated conflicts, and hurled insults at classmates. The administration suspended her more than once. Her academics stalled completely, and her overall behavior continued to decline. It was during this time that she first mentioned someone named Forrest. According to Miranda, he was an adult, about 20 years old, and part of a group she described as satanic. She told stories about participating in strange rituals, claiming that after one of them, she somehow became connected to Forrest. These were confessions she shared with her mother. Elizabeth, alarmed, tried to intervene and forbade Miranda from any further contact with him. In response, Miranda ran away. There is no official confirmation that Forrest ever existed. Authorities later found no evidence of his identity, no records, no witnesses, no known group. Everything known about him comes solely from Miranda's accounts. Some close to her would later say she had a tendency to make things up, particularly during times when she felt ignored or craved attention. But to Miranda, the story was real. She acted as if the experience of submission and psychological control had truly shaped her. After this period, her behavior became even more chaotic. She would later say that it was from this point on that she lost control over herself. Her fixation with dark symbolism, rituals, power, and dominance began during this time. She seemed completely adrift. Neither home, school, nor her social circle provided any kind of anchor. She was unraveling fast, and no one managed, or perhaps even tried, to stop it. By the time Miranda turned 14, she was overwhelmed. Her actions grew erratic, her mood swings were severe, and her relationships with others became increasingly damaging. At one point, she attempted to harm herself. The exact method was never publicly disclosed, but it was serious enough to pose a real threat to her safety. This incident marked the only time her biological father stepped in. He signed off on a psychiatric admission, though he did not involve himself personally beyond that. At the facility, Miranda was diagnosed with depressive disorder and prescribed medication. Doctors recommended a long-term course of therapy. However, she was discharged after a short stay. Ongoing support was never arranged. She returned to the same environment, her mother still battling dependency issues, her sister living a separate life. There were no steady, supportive adults around her. After being discharged from the facility, Miranda never returned to school. Technically, she was still enrolled, but she stopped attending classes altogether. Her education came to an end in practice. Most of her time was spent with older crowds, and her social circle changed frequently. Her lifestyle became that of an adult, not in terms of responsibility, but in terms of high-risk behavior. She continued using banned substances, engaged in questionable relationships, and often stayed away from home overnight. No lasting bonds were formed. By the age of 17, news surfaced that Miranda was expecting. The pregnancy came as a surprise even to her. She wasn't sure who the father was. There were a few possibilities, but no certainty. Despite her unstable circumstances, she chose to continue with the pregnancy. Her reasons remained unclear. Maybe it was an instinctive attempt to hold on to something solid. The pregnancy went relatively smoothly, though she had limited access to medical supervision. The baby girl was born full term. Miranda named her Aria. From that moment on, she had someone who depended on her completely. But along with that responsibility came new challenges. The family situation grew worse. Elizabeth was in a deeply unstable state. Ashley had already moved out. Social services began looking into custody arrangements for Miranda and her daughter. Given Miranda's age and her mother's condition, authorities decided she and the baby needed to be placed under the care of other family members. Custody was granted to relatives living in North Carolina. This move was a formal step away from a destructive environment. But what Miranda carried inside didn't go away. Aria became an anchor, but not a cure. Once in North Carolina, Miranda and her daughter moved into the home of extended relatives. Social workers approved the arrangement, considering it a more stable setting. Oversight increased, but Miranda didn't feel emotionally supported. She felt like a responsibility to be managed, not a person to be cared for. Once again, she withdrew into herself. It was in that house that Miranda met Elytte Barber. He was 20 at the time and a regular visitor, staying connected with one of the family members. At the time, Elytte was in a relationship with a woman named Amy, and they were expecting a child together. Miranda, meanwhile, was still caring for her infant daughter Aria. Despite their different circumstances, she and Elytte quickly formed a strong connection. Elytte had a deep interest in unusual subjects. He often talked about religious cults, rituals, and symbolism. For him, it wasn't just a curiosity, it felt like a source of personal power. Miranda didn't shy away. On the contrary, her own stories about being part of a group she described as satanic only deepened their bond. They talked about power, sacrifice, and control. These weren't sarcastic or ironic conversations. They treated them as part of their reality. At first, Amy didn't see Miranda as a threat. The two even spent time together, going for walks with their babies. But over time, the differences between the two women became clearer. Amy was looking for stability. Miranda wasn't. She didn't hide her attraction to risk or the unconventional topics others wouldn't even mention. Elytte began to distance himself from Amy. A few months after the baby was born, Amy left. She took her child and moved out. No detailed explanation was given, but it was clear that tensions between her and Elytte had escalated. Their relationship ended. Elytte stayed, this time, with Miranda. From that moment on, their connection only grew stronger. Now they were living under the same roof. Their talks about rituals took on a new tone. No longer just abstract ideas, but something more actionable. A sense of uniqueness started to take shape. They saw themselves as a unit separate from ordinary society. Outsiders felt irrelevant. Their views on relationships, morals, and boundaries became more aligned. They didn't consider themselves special, but in reality, they functioned as an isolated pair. All major decisions were made together, with little regard for outside opinions. They spent more and more time alone, gradually shutting everyone else out. Their conversations often drifted toward the idea of creating something meaningful, not a family or a shared business, but something unique, something that belonged only to them. A few months into the relationship, Miranda and Elytte got married. There was no celebration, no family gathering. Relatives from both sides were not invited. Most of them didn't support the union anyway. The reason was clear: their lifestyle. It was unstable, shaped by the use of banned substances and strange, unsettling interests. But Miranda and Elytte didn't feel they needed anyone's approval. To them, the wedding wasn't a social event. It was an act of independence. Shortly after registering their marriage, they made a decision to leave North Carolina. Neither of them had a job, and the future looked bleak. Elytte lacked any professional experience, and Miranda didn't have an education. Supporting themselves and Miranda's daughter, Aria, was becoming harder by the day. They started looking for a way out, someplace far from family, far from routine. Their destination was Port Trevorton, a small rural town in Pennsylvania. A friend of Elitte's lived there and offered them a place to stay temporarily. The town was remote, quiet, with fewer than 500 residents. No public transportation, no real infrastructure. But to the couple, that was ideal. Less attention, less oversight. They moved in with Aria and initially stayed at the friend's place rent-free. Their money ran out quickly. Food and basic necessities came from odd jobs and occasional help from their host. Elytte tried finding work. He sent out resumes, went to interviews, but nothing worked out. His unstable presentation, lack of experience, and overall appearance didn't help his chances. Miranda began looking for another way to earn money. She turned to an online platform known for classified ads, where people posted about everything from used furniture to personal services. She created a profile, describing herself as a companion. She clearly stated that she didn't offer any explicit services. The emphasis was on non-intimate companionship, meetups, outings, event accompaniment. She claimed she had done this type of work before and didn't see it as something shameful. A response came quickly. A man named Troy replied to the ad. He was 42, married, and had a stable job in IT. In his message, he expressed interest in meeting but made subtle references suggesting there might be more to the arrangement. The amount of money he offered made it clear he had significant financial resources, and that alone caught Miranda's attention. It wasn't the nature of the meeting that stood out. It was the money behind it. Miranda discussed it with Elytte. Their reaction wasn't what most would expect. An idea began to take shape. He was the one who first mentioned the money. Together, they began thinking about how to use the situation to their advantage. From that moment on, the online platform stopped being just a side hustle. It became a tool, a method for something bigger. What started as a response to financial pressure slowly turned into a plan, a deliberate, detailed strategy with a specific goal in mind. Troy LaFerrara, 42 years old, married, employed, outwardly respectable. He worked as an engineer at an IT firm, earned a steady income, and lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. His neighbors saw him as a model husband. No criminal record, no complaints. But that was just the public side of his life. In private, Troy was searching for secret meetups with women through online platforms. He regularly browsed personal ads, initiated conversations, and arranged encounters, carefully keeping his two lives separate. At home, he gave no reason for suspicion. He came across Miranda's ad shortly after she posted it. Though the listing didn't explicitly mention anything intimate, the tone suggested she was open to conversations. Troy sent her a message expressing interest and asked for details. Their chat quickly moved to private messaging. He offered to pay. His rate was well above average. That immediately made him stand out. Miranda accepted the offer. It wasn't the first response she had received like this, but something about Troy caught her attention. On the surface, it was a typical transaction. In reality, it was a carefully crafted setup. November 11th, a shopping center parking lot. Troy pulled up to the agreed meeting spot. Miranda was already waiting. He got into her car and handed over the agreed payment. He acted calmly. There was nothing alarming about his behavior. The car was quiet. The route had already been planned. A remote country road outside of town. In the trunk, Elytte was hiding under a blanket. He knew when to act. He was waiting for one specific phrase. That was the cue. Outside, the dark road stretched on, far from any traffic or onlookers. A few miles later, Miranda slowed down and pulled off to the side. She turned to Troy and said, "Did you see how bright the stars are tonight?" That was the signal. Elytte burst out of the trunk holding a piece of electrical wire. He wrapped it around Troy's neck. The attempt to restrain him was sudden. Troy instinctively fought back. His strong build and adrenaline helped him resist. He stayed conscious, struggled to break free, even opened the car door and got one leg out. Miranda saw headlights approaching in the distance. She took out a knife, leaned in, and began striking. Over and over, chest, abdomen, neck, 20 times in total. The force and precision of the blows spoke of sheer rage. Troy stopped resisting. He passed away at the scene. Elytte closed the door. They drove a few more miles, body in the car. Eventually, they stopped at a secluded roadside area. They removed his wallet, his watch, and some cash. The phone was left behind, perhaps by accident, perhaps not. They left the body in a roadside ditch. No attempt to cover it. No effort to hide the evidence. Afterward, they headed to Walmart. They bought everything needed for cleaning: bleach, brushes, gloves, and wipes. No one in the store paid them any attention. They paid in cash, using money from Troy's wallet. They cleaned the car at a separate, remote location. They managed to remove some of the evidence, wiped down the seats, floor mats, and door panels. The remaining pieces of the electrical wire were discarded. That evening, they went out to a restaurant. It was Elitte's birthday. They chose a high-end place, ordered full meals and drinks. Once again, they paid in cash. The dinner was calm and uneventful. The next morning, they returned to their usual routine. Their behavior didn't raise any alarms. No signs of worry, no tension, no fear. Troy LaFerrara's body was found the following morning. It was lying near the roadside, partially covered by grass. There were no signs of an attempt to hide it. Nearby were his clothes and his cell phone. That phone became the key. The device was still powered on. In its memory were recent calls and texts. One number appeared repeatedly. Investigators traced the phone number. The registered SIM card led them to Miranda Barber. A detective was dispatched to her listed address, and she was invited to the station for a routine interview. The reason was described as a standard follow-up related to calls made to the victim. During the first questioning, Miranda appeared calm. She denied knowing Troy and insisted they had never met. She said it was possible she had accidentally answered a call from an unknown number, but didn't recall any details. When asked about the online platform, she hesitated for a brief moment, but responded that she hadn't used the site in a long time. The conversation lasted about an hour. Then the detective asked if he could look through her phone. That's when her demeanor changed. Miranda shut down. She said she wouldn't hand over her phone without a warrant. Her tone became tense. Officers noted the sudden shift in behavior and chose to release her for the time being. There wasn't enough to justify holding her. Back at home, Miranda seemed deeply unsettled. She stayed quiet for several hours. Then, without warning, she confessed to a friend they had been staying with. She had been involved in Troy's death. She shared details, names, motives, the full story. The friend was stunned. He didn't know how to react, but urged her to go to the police. He insisted. He told her that if she didn't go, he would. Around 4 a.m. that night, Miranda returned to the police station. She asked to speak with a detective and said she wanted to tell the truth. She immediately added that the incident had an element of self-defense. According to her, she had arranged to meet Troy through an online ad. She claimed he became aggressive and tried to force himself on her. Out of fear, she said, she grabbed a knife and struck him. She made no mention of the wire or Elytte. The police documented her statement, but the physical evidence didn't support it. The number of wounds, the signs of strangulation, and the presence of another person pointed to a very different scenario. That was her first lie, but it wouldn't be her last. Following Miranda's confession, the investigation shifted its focus to Elytte Barber. He was at the house where Miranda returned after her initial questioning. His demeanor was calm. He didn't seem anxious or alarmed. Since her admission, he had stayed silent. He didn't defend himself, didn't offer explanations. Even when he learned that Miranda had told the police about her meeting with Troy, Elytte showed no reaction. The police decided to bring him in for questioning, citing their cohabitation and the possibility that he had knowledge of what happened. Elytte came in voluntarily. He gave short answers and denied any involvement. He claimed he had no idea about the meeting and insisted he hadn't left the house the day of the incident. His tone was steady and confident. Investigators didn't rush to draw conclusions. They needed more evidence. A request was sent to the shopping center for surveillance footage. The security camera in the parking lot captured a clear image. Just before Miranda met with Troy, a man got into the back seat of her car. His face was visible. The camera angle left no room for doubt. It was Elytte. Once shown the footage, Elitte's story changed. During a second interview, he admitted to being there. He described what happened and confirmed he had known about the plan and had taken part in the attack. According to him, the idea had been mutual. The phrase Miranda used was prearranged. The wire and knife had been prepared in advance. He didn't express remorse. The detective noted that Elytte spoke in a detached, matter-of-fact tone. He didn't hesitate or pause. His responses came out like a checklist. We chose the road. I hid in the car. When she said the phrase, I used the wire. A psychological evaluator observed a complete lack of emotion. Elitte's voice didn't change, even when he described the moment Troy lost consciousness. After the confession, Elytte was formally placed under arrest. Comparing his statement with Miranda's, authorities concluded that the self-defense narrative didn't hold up. The two had acted according to a plan. The act had been intentional, coordinated, and carried out together. The investigation was following a clear path: one victim, two participants, confessions, and evidence. But everything changed after a phone call from jail. Miranda herself reached out to reporters. She wasn't asking for mercy. She didn't plead for understanding. Instead, she made a statement that shifted the entire case into national headlines. In the interview, she said Troy wasn't the first. According to Miranda, there had been others, 22 in total. She didn't give names, locations, or time frames. She just said she stopped counting after the 20th. The interview spread rapidly. Headlines said it all. Female serial offender. Law enforcement had to respond. A new round of investigations began. Miranda was brought back in for more questioning. This time, she was asked directly. Where? When? Who? Her answers were vague. Authorities reached out to other states where she had reportedly lived. No matching cases were found. No bodies, no missing persons linked to her, no witnesses. Soon, her family spoke publicly. Her father, sister, and others who knew her all emphasized one thing. Miranda had always had a tendency to fabricate stories, especially when she wanted attention. Even as a child, she would make up elaborate tales in which she played the central role. And as she got older, that trait only intensified. According to them, her claim about 22 victims was just another attempt to manipulate. They said they didn't believe a single word. But Elytte believed her. His interrogation was recorded. When the conversation shifted to the possibility of other victims, he nodded affirmatively and said that Miranda had indeed shared stories like that with him. He noted that, during those moments, she seemed to become someone else, like a different version of herself. In his words, it wasn't just her. It was something else. Elytte even gave that side of her a name: Super Miranda, believing it was how her inner darkness came to the surface. He was convinced that something unfamiliar, almost inhuman, was hidden behind her everyday appearance. And when that part of her emerged, something happened that even he admitted made him feel afraid. According to him, he never quite knew which Miranda he was with. He said he had lived with two versions of her. After the confessions and the close of the investigation, the case quickly moved to trial. The courtroom was devoid of emotion. No tears, no outbursts, no dramatic displays of remorse. Everything felt procedural and restrained. The judge read the sentence. Miranda stood silently. So did Elytte. News cameras captured their expressions. Ordinary, blank, showing no fear, no regret. The court sentenced them both to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Months later, a tragic update emerged. Miranda's mother, Elizabeth, had ended her life. She didn't leave a note. Family members confirmed that her mental and emotional health had been in serious decline for a long time. The collapse of her daughter's life, the public shame, and the complete unraveling of the family, they said, had been the final blow. Her body was discovered at home. The cause of death was an overdose. As for Aria, Miranda's daughter, after Miranda's arrest, she was placed temporarily under the care of child welfare services. In 2016, following the death of her grandmother, the state took over custody permanently. Nothing more was publicly shared about her future. It's known only that, for her protection, her last name was changed. Where she is now remains unknown. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.